NRATV with Bill Whittle.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Hot Mike. Hot Mike is out having some minor brain surgery. We expect him back tomorrow. Right then, until now, I'm Bill Whittle, joining you from Los Angeles, California, where the never will you find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy. We've been talking about the pop culture corruption. We've been talking about the fake news. We've been talking about the lies that people tell in order to be able to do their job over the hill there in Hollywood. But today we've got an example that I take kind of personally, to be perfectly honest with you. So let's just back up and tell you a little bit about the story of Comedy Central's reporter, Jordan Klepper. So here's the basics. Jordan Klepper did a segment, 5-10 minute segment for Comedy Central quite a while ago called Good Guy with a Gun, in which he did the standard modern snarky left-wing shtick, which is go to a gun range, act like a complete yahoo. When do I get to start killing, brown people? That kind of thing. And wait for the reaction. Wait for those racists out there in flyover country to say, yeah, I can't wait to start doing that either. Well, unfortunately for Klepper, he was dealing with people that just, I thought, made him look really silly. He went to the gun range and he dealt with a professional instructor, and what point do I get to hold it like this? And the guy was very calm and very nice. So it's important that you understand not only that this news is biased and that the story is biased, but my job, I think, is to disassemble it and to show you how it actually works. So the first thing that happens in a case like that is Jordan Klepper shows up at a gun range as his image of what we are. In other words, as just a racist, loudmouth, undisciplined lunatic. And then act that way on camera, hope something good comes up, and if not, then at least you get to have a little inside joke, with your buddies back there in your audience who are all telling each other how smart and how moral they are when actually they're neither. So Jordan Klepper in Good Guy with a Gun was, in the promo for his next show, he was in the NRA show in Atlanta where I was broadcasting with Grant and Dana, a bunch of other people. And he had several hours to walk on the floor with, 60, 70, 80,000 people and interview completely just normal NRA members on the street. And folks, I've done a fair amount of editing, and I'm telling you, you can make anybody say just about anything. But even then, he couldn't find anything really inflammatory. What he ended up with was he'd ask somebody, hey, what was your favorite shooting? And some guy at the show basically said, my favorite shooting is some kind of a shooting match that was done, an actual competition shooting. So he basically got nothing out of that. So anyway, now that was the setup. So now he's basically done an anti-gun special called Jordan Klepper Solves Guns. And now that we know basically how he operates, there's a little clip from this that I would like to play because, as I said, I think this one I take a little personally. So let's see if we can roll that clip from the segment that I think pertains to us in our audience.
Yeah, I'm looking for the National Rifle Association.
And you are? Who are you looking for?
I'm television's Jordan Klepper.
Your television's who?
I've been traveling across the country talking to a lot of different Americans, and it turns out the NRA doesn't seem to represent a lot of their own ideals. So I just wanted to have a meeting, a little chin wag with some NRA folks.
Okay, well, you have to, I don't...
Well, that didn't work. Neither did tweeting or emailing or even voice.
Okay, so what is it about that's so interesting and so damning and so immoral and so unprofessional and wrong and all the rest of it? The reason that Jordan Klepper went to that building was so that on camera during his special he could say that the NRA refused to answer our calls. We tried to reach them, but the NRA refused to answer our calls. We tried to confront the NRA with this outburst of murder in America, but the NRA refused to answer our calls. See how it works? See how it works? It's designed to make it look, for their audiences that don't know any better, that the NRA doesn't give a darn and that this whole thing is just, whatever. But again, what exactly was he doing? He shows up at a door. He's at a door. Is he talking to the director of public relations for the NRA? No. Is he talking to one of the on-camera hosts who've challenged him to debates or at least offered to have him on the show? No. He's talking to a security guard. He's talking to a security guard who's looking at a little thing on the camera, and he basically, his introduction is, "Hi, I'm television's Jordan Klepper, and I'd like to talk to the NRA about how it doesn't reflect America's views." Well, guess what, Jordan? I'm the Internet's Bill Whittle, and I'd like to come to Comedy Central and talk to one of your security guards, and I will take that to be the staff policy of Comedy Central going forward, and I'll make a nice little edit out of that, and we'll see how that works out for you. It's just plain lying is what it is. It's lying, and the reason it's not just underhanded and deceitful and is in fact a lie is because our producer for the show and the producer for the Grant Stinchfield show that I talked about this on earlier this morning, my friend Grant and I, Grant has never, ever talked about anybody who's anti-gun without closing by saying, anytime you want to come on the show and talk about it, you're more than welcome to. But in this particular case, our producers here at the NRA sent an email not only to the production head at Comedy Central, but to the producers on this show, formal email saying, would you like to talk to us about this special before you do it? We didn't just show up at the door, knock once, and say to a security guard, "Hey, I'm from the NRA. Can I talk to the president, please?" He's not in right now. Okay, obviously Comedy Central doesn't want to talk to us. It's a miserable, low-down, filthy lie is what it is. And Jordan Klepper is a miserable, low-down, filthy liar, and he's a coward. You can put that down on a tweet and send it out as wide as you possibly can. This is the kind of thing that makes me absolutely furious, but it does something more important than that, and it does this. It tells me that if the left cannot argue with us by telling the truth, if they have to invent things like that in order to make a point, then they don't have a point to make. If they can't come at you with an honest argument, then they don't have an honest argument, and that means they lose. It's just simply unbelievable. I want to get to our guest here, but Jordan Klepper had a quote about this. But just to close this up, he did a Rolling Stone interview recently, and he was talking about what it took to do this. He said, "I want to play a character that poked fun at both the left, but was also creation of the people on the right. Oh, you're a comedian. That means you're out to take our guns. Well, what if I am? Let me play that character who earnestly wants to go do that. The people who make the most sense in this special hopefully aren't me. They're the moderates who shine because I get to outflank them farther on the left." So he plays this lunatic. He has moderates come on, and they sound like the voice of America and reason. But right after that question, next question in the Rolling Stone interview, Rolling Stone asked him, he said, "Speaking of people who have walked that line, Stephen Colbert," who you remember from the Colbert Report, now he's on late night TV, "Stephen Colbert's standard wisdom for correspondents doing field pieces was, check your soul at the door." Too late. I suspect if you had a soul, Jordan, you'd be in a different line of work. That's pretty much what I suspect. Well, we have a treat for you now. It's certainly a treat for me because I'd like to bring in our friend Dan Bongino. Dan is a former Secret Service agent, and we know him as the Renegade Republican. Had a lot of fun talking with Dan back in Atlanta about a month or two ago. And Dan's got a new book coming out called Protecting the President that we'll get to talk about in a minute. Dan, good to see you, buddy. How have you been?
Yeah, good to be back. I'm doing okay. Thanks for having me.
Good to see you again, pal. So, Dan, you've been on the inside of all of this, and I'd like to just start off by asking you a question. Everything that these progressives believe, and that means the pop culture, which means most of their audience, which means half the country, believe things like there's such a thing as a silencer, or if you put a pillow over a gun when you fire it, it goes. If you have a silencer, it goes.
Yeah, they saw that in the movies. Somewhere.
In movies, yeah, I've seen it in every movie. In movies, Dan, you can outrun an explosion, which would have been useful information for you to have, I'm sure, while you were out there in the field actually doing what these people pretended to do.
That would have been great. We just would have briefed the president. Just would have been great. Really fast.
Yeah, and then just duck bullets. So the first thing I wanted to talk to you about this with the whole pop culture thing, Dan, is as a person who does this professionally, what is it that you see the most often on television, representatives of either the Secret Service or military people in general, that you find most appalling?
Well, gosh, I mean, the cavalier fashion in which they use firearms. You know, the safest people in the world with regard to gun safety, gun responsibility, which are, you know, are intertwined, are real legitimate gun owners. I mean, these are the people who ensure. I've had guns in my house my entire life. And you know what, Bill? This is amazing. Your audience needs to get ready for this. They've never magically fired themselves. That's crazy how that happens, you know? They've never just
I'm
gone
surprised
off.
to hear that.
Yeah, it's amazing. Casper the Friendly.
My understanding was that the gun's my understanding was that the gun essentially leaps up off the coffee table and begins firing. So you're saying that that's not true either, huh?
Yeah, and I mean, and you see these things in the movies which give people a distorted view about what guns do, what they don't do. And you know what's ironic is, you know, there's a chicken or egg argument here. I mean, I don't let my kids, and my daughter's 13 now, so it's not like she's I have a 13-year-old and a 5-year-old. But I don't let my daughter watch violent movies because gun owners aren't violent. We're interested in firearms as tools of self-protection. We're not interested in violence. We're interested in countering violence. But what's fascinating is the liberal Hollywood community, you know, which is fascinated with this idea of using guns in a gratuitously violent fashion in film to make money off people. They don't seem to have any problem with that at all. They celebrate violence with firearms. It's incredible.
This is it. They turn it into, it's almost a form of pornography when you get into things like The Matrix and so on. So this is the part that is enough to drive any kind of thinking person out of their mind. The left, in Hollywood and movies and television, creates a vision of guns and people with guns as being reckless and wild, and then they glorify the murders, slow motion, blood explosions, all these blood packets. They turn it into this fetish. At the shootout scene in The Matrix is beautifully photographed. It's one of the best pieces of cinema ever made. But did I just say cinema? Sorry, I meant to say movies. But basically, they are glamorizing all of this murder and violence. Dillon and Klebold, the first of these modern kind of school shooters, were heavily influenced by The Matrix, so they're wearing the black cloaks and all that. And so then they have the nerve, Dan, to come out and after demonstrating this sense of ill discipline, to say the least, then they start condemning people who behave themselves with guns and who take guns seriously and who treat them with respect. They start coming out and saying that we're the problem, and if only they, Hollywood stars, could do anything. What could we possibly do?
Yeah, I mean, I gave up trying to explain away Looney Tunes liberals a long time ago. They're kooks. I mean, they don't live in the real world. And, you know, we want to talk practically about it, which means the liberals will probably tune out because we're using reason. You know, there is this chicken or egg thing, you know, do violent movies cause people to be violent, or do violent people inherently seek out violent movies? Mm-hmm. Frankly, Bill, I don't really care. I don't like gratuitous violence. Either way, it doesn't matter to me. Even if naturally violent people seek out violent products that are gratuitous and I think your analogy is correct, by the way, violence pornography with firearms. It's not a positive for society either way. But they don't seem to get that. This, to me, is an ideological fight. And that's what they do. They hide behind pseudoscience. Like, well, it could just be that violent people seek out these violent movies. But that's the thing. And that's why I rarely, if ever, go to the movies anymore. Because, you know, as a matter of fact, I was just in a Twitter thing with this Mark Ruffalo guy who's like the Hulk or something in the Avengers. Yeah. I mean, these guys are just natural ideological enemies of ours. They don't support freedom. And one more thing on this. I mean, you know, it's just interesting that we're not about the weapons. I think every NRA member and gun owner in the country would say tomorrow, listen, if we could all move to a magical fairyland tomorrow where no violence and no guns existed, and your gun is the price of admission, hey, fine. Everybody would do that.
Absolutely.
No violence, no guns, no knives, no weapons. That's terrific. But there's no world like that exists anywhere in the known universe. So stop pretending it does. It's a utopian fallacy, and it's what liberals live on because they don't use reason or logic.
Okay, we're going to take a break. We're going to be back with Dan in a minute. But I want to make sure that all of you out there at Comedy Central and Jordan Klepper and all the rest of you in Hollywood, I want to make sure you just heard what this man said. This is a professional. This is what he does for a living. He's a professional who risks his life for a living and has had an entire lifetime filled with firearms and the use of firearms and having to use them for real. And this man just said, I don't like gratuitous violence. I don't like letting my daughter see the kind of violence that you Hollywood people produce, and he's the real deal, and you're not. He's the one who's for gun safety, and you're not. He's the one who's repulsed by violence, and you're not. That's because he's a better person than you are. We'll be back right after the break. I'm Bill Whittle, and this is Hot Mike.